Hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin, check. You already know. Let's go. Golden Blued is a college football YouTube channel for entertainment. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let's get into our next college football video. You know, I know head coaches in college football get paid a crap ton of money, but that is one of the most stressful jobs there has to be, period. I mean, you're entrusted a lot of responsibility. Yes, you get paid a lot of money, but man, if you fail, your name is going to be all over ESPN and whatever sports outlet there is, even YouTube channels like myself. So I don't know if I can handle that. I'm just going to be honest. I'm an adult. I can admit things. I can admit my faults. I don't know if I could handle that stress, especially first-year head coaches taking over a high-profile team that hasn't been doing very well. They're expected to do better immediately because the reason why that program fired the previous head coach, that head coach wasn't getting the job done. So we're going to look at the coaches in their first year of 2022, how good and how bad they did. Now, there's a lot of first-year head coaches from 2022, so here are the names that I'm not going to be talking about.
Stan Drayton at Temple, Mike Elko at Duke, even though he had a fantastic first year at Duke, going 8-4. Brent K at Georgia Tech, I think he did a decent job. Tony Elliott at Virginia. Joey McGuire at Texas Tech, his first full year at Texas Tech, did pretty decent. Mike McIntyre at FIU, Rich Rodriguez at Jacksonville State, Jerry Kill at New Mexico State, Jim Mora at UConn, did get them to a bowl. Joe Moorhead at Akron, Jay Norvell at Colorado State, Jeff Tedford at Fresno State, Jimmy Chang at Hawaii, Ken Wilson at Nevada, Clay Helton at Georgia Southern, Michael DeSormo at Louisiana, and John Summerall at Troy. Sorry guys, not going to talk about those first-year head coaches.
Let's talk about the coaches in their first year at a little bit higher profile teams and see if they flopped miserably in their first year or they actually did pretty good. The first one is, of course, Lincoln Riley, his first year at USC. USC in 2021, they went 4-8, averaged 28.7 points per game, which is 65th, and allowed 31.8 points per game, which is 103rd. So anything was going to be better than that. Lincoln Riley had it made going into that position. All he had to do was get USC to a bowl, and that was a successful first year as a head coach. What did he do? Well, in 2022, USC went 11-2, averaged 41.1 points per game, which was 3rd, and allowed 27.9 points per game, which is 81st. So not a great defense, but still an improvement from 2021. So yes, Lincoln Riley had a great, successful first year, and he's already grabbed the #1 quarterback in the 2023 recruiting class in Malachi Nelson. So I think he's going to have a lot of success over there at USC, and I would give him an A- over there at USC because, yes, they did have some talent with him coming in, but he still did a good job. But that's why I'm not giving him an A or an A+. A-, still a good grade. Sonny Dykes at TCU. This one surprised me, guys. In 2021, TCU went 5-7. They averaged 28.7 points per game, which is 66, and allowed 34.9 points per game, which is 118th. What did he do? Well, expectations weren't very high at TCU, but they went 12-1. They're in the playoffs. They averaged 40.3 points per game, which is 6th, and allowed 25 points per game, which is 58th. I give Sonny Dykes an A+ at TCU. I thought TCU was going to have an identity crisis, and I had them picked down to near the bottom, competing with Kansas. Even though I thought Kansas was going to be a little bit better in sniffing a bowl, they did get to a bowl. But TCU, I was 100% wrong about TCU. Only one of 2 teams that I was completely wrong about, TCU and, yes, West Virginia. So I give Sonny Dykes an A+. That's right, an A+. Couldn't have done it any better except for beat Kansas State in the Big 12 championship. But still, that's got to get an A+. What about Billy Napier at Florida? Yikes. In 2021, Florida went 6-7, averaged 30.7 points per game, which is 49th, and allowed 26.8 points per game, which is 74th. What did he do in year 1? Well, he went 6-7. No improvement whatsoever. In fact, the offense was worse, averaging 29.5 points per game, which is 57th. And the defense was much worse, allowing 28.8 points per game, which is 91st. Billy Napier, man, you got to do better than that. This was tragic. This was horrible to watch. Florida went down in flames this year. Even though they had the same exact record as they had last year, they looked worse than what they did last year. Billy Napier, you had better get it together or you're going to be making a quick exit out of Florida. You get an F. That's right, you failed. I understand that Florida got to a bowl, but you didn't improve whatsoever. In fact, you got worse. Even though the record was the same, you got worse. You failed. That's an F. Mario Cristobal over there at the Miami Hurricanes. In 2021, they went 7-5, averaged 34.1 points per game, which is 23rd, and allowed 28.4 points per game, which is 85th. In 2022, what happens? They take a step backwards. They finished the regular season 5-7, much worse on offense, averaging 23.6 points per game, which is 98th. A little bit better on defense, allowed 26.8 points per game, which is 69th. But still, this was an utter fiasco. Miami fans had higher expectations for their head coach in his first year more than Florida fans did. What do? He failed them miserably. Mario Cristobal, you also get an F. This is unacceptable. Miami had way too much talent for them to go 5-7 in the ACC. That's not going to cut it. You most definitely get an F, sir. Next up is Dan Lanning, the head coach that replaced Mario Cristobal at Oregon. In 2021, Oregon went 10-4, averaged 31.4 points per game, which is 42nd, and allowed 27 points per game, which is 75th. And in 2022, so far, they're going to a bowl. Remember, they finished 9-3, averaging 39.7 points per game, which is 9th, so a much improved offense, and allowing 27.4 points per game, which is 77th. So about the same on defense. I think Dan Lanning did a pretty good job in his first year. I'm going to give him a solid B. Yes, there's room for improvement, and he could have done better, but still, that's a solid job in your first year. Well done. I know Oregon wasn't really in bad shape. Mario Cristobal left. He wasn't fired. But first year, I think Dan Lanning did a good job. You get a solid B, buddy. What about Brent Venables over there at Oklahoma? Yikes. 2021, Oklahoma went 11-2. They averaged 39.1 points per game, which is 8th, and allowed 25.8 points per game, which is 60th. And in 2022, Oklahoma went 6-6, including losing to West Virginia for the first time since West Virginia joined the Big 12. They averaged 32.9 points per game, which is 35th, and allowed 29.6 points per game, which is 99th. So worst on both sides of the ball. I'm not going to give you an F because you did get to a bowl. And I know Billy Napier took Florida to a bowl. But it was the same exact record and they were worse. So I'm not going to fail you, but I am going to give you a solid D. This was unacceptable according to Oklahoma standards. And if he doesn't improve dramatically, Brent Venables might be a failed experiment over there in Norman. What about Marcus Freeman over there at Notre Dame? This was an up and down year for Notre Dame. Very, very weird. So in 2021, Notre Dame went 11-2. That's a pretty good record. They averaged 35.2 points per game, which is 20th, and allowed 19.7 points per game, which is 15th. So solid on both sides of the ball. 2022, 8-4, so yes, slight step backwards. Averaged 30.7 points per game, which is 49th, and allowed 21.8 points per game, which is 31st. The weird thing is they lost to both Marshall and Stanford, but then they beat teams like Syracuse, North Carolina, and Clemson. This was a very up and down year for Marcus Freeman, but still, I think it was a solid year. I'm going to give him a B-. You can't lose to Marshall and you can't lose to Stanford. That would have bumped your grade higher had you not lost to those teams. But still a solid year, so I'm going to give you a B-. What about Kalen DeBoer over there at Washington? In 2021, they went 4-8, averaged 21.5 points per game, which is 108th, allowed 22.7 points per game, which is 37th. Decent defense, terrible offense. 2022, a much better Washington, which I anticipated. I predicted that. They finished 10-2. Averaging 40.8 points per game, which is 5th, thanks to the transfer of Michael Penix Jr. And I predicted Washington to take this massive step forward on offense. They allowed 26.3 points per game, which is 64th. So not as good on defense, but I give Kalen DeBoer a solid B+ over there at Washington. I knew Washington had talent. This is a solid effort. I have to give him a B+. And Washington is in pretty good hands. They could have an even better year in 2023. They're recruiting at a high level as well. What about Brian Kelly over there at LSU? In 2021, LSU went 6-7, averaged 26.5 points per game, which is 80th, and allowed 26.6 points per game, which is 70th. 2022, 9-4, lost their last 2 games. That was kind of a bummer. But overall, averaged 32.3 points per game, which is 37th, and allowed 23.7 points per game, which is 46th. So they improved on both sides of the ball, and LSU did beat Alabama, so you have to give him credit. I think this was a successful year for Brian Kelly in his first year at LSU. I'm giving him a solid B. Room for improvement, yes, but still a solid job in his first year at LSU. So y'all let me know in the comments section, number 1, what coaches surprised you in 2022 as far as their first year? Who do you think did the best in their first year, and who do you think did the worst in their first year? That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you on my next show.